So they give us some examples here for exercise 426. So they tell us at the beginning of June, our company has 2 jobs that are in process, so job 44 and 45. So they were started in May and they weren't finished in May, so they continue to roll with us through June. And they have the following accumulated costs. So this is what they did in the month of May. They had direct materials that were added to their jobs in May. They had direct labor costs that was incurred, and they had applied overhead associated with each one of those jobs. So what their ending balance in May was becomes their beginning balance for June. And we're going to put together what's called job order cost sheets. And one thing that I want to point out with job order cost sheets is the only thing that goes into a job order cost sheet is in fact cost. So you're never going to put hours in there, so just kind of be mindful of that. Sorry, a fire truck going by my house right now. So they tell us that at the end of June, jobs 44, 45, and 47 were completed. Only job 45 was sold, and on June 1st, the balance in finished goods was 0. They tell us that during June, 2 more jobs 46 and 47, were started, and the following direct materials and direct labor costs were added to those 4 jobs for the month of June. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to calculate our predetermined overhead rate, and it's going to be based on direct labor cost. Then we're going to prepare some job order cost sheets, and then determine the ending balances in work in process and finished goods, and calculate the amount of our cost of our goods sold. So the first thing that they're telling us is that our predetermined overhead rate is based on direct labor cost. So I put that note for you at the start of that first example that said if your driver is in dollars, meaning cost, your predetermined overhead rate is going to be percentage rate. So we're going to have a percentage rate. So if we think about what we did in the last 2 examples, we took our estimated overhead for the year and divided it by that estimated total cost driver. They didn't provide us any of that information. They did not tell us what the company assumes that their total overhead cost is going to be for the period. They did not tell us how much they think their total direct labor cost is going to be for the year. So how in the world would we ever figure this out? Well, they did provide us something. They provided us how much overhead was applied to jobs 44 and 45 last month. And we know that that predetermined overhead rate is calculated at the start of the fiscal year, and it doesn't change. So we can utilize this information in order for us to determine what our predetermined overhead rate is in fact going to be. And we can use job 44 or 45 because it's going to yield us the same answer. So job 44, we had a total overhead applied of $780 last month. And remember, our driver is direct labor cost, and we know that they incur direct labor cost of $1,200. So if we divide the 2, it tells us that our overhead that was applied based on that direct labor was 65%. If we do job 45, $1,950 in overhead was applied based off of $3,000 in direct labor cost. We're still at 65%. That means our predetermined overhead rate is 65% of the direct labor cost associated with each job. So now that we know that, we can go ahead and start our job order cost sheets. So job order cost sheets are pretty simple. Every job has their own job order cost sheet. And again, it's just going to track the costs that are associated with each one of those jobs. So we know job 44 and job 45 were started last month, excuse me, and they had some beginning balances. So we're going to pull those beginning balances over. Job 46 and 47 didn't get started until this month, so they didn't have anything to start with. Direct materials and direct labor, both direct costs, both traced to a cost object, and they've already provided us that information here. So $2,500 in direct materials $800 in direct labor, $7,110 in direct materials, $6,400 in direct labor for job 45, $1,800 in direct materials, $900 in direct labor for job 46, $1,700 in direct materials for job 47, and $560 in direct labor. So now we can apply out the overhead. And again, the whole purpose of an overhead rate is because each one of these jobs is consuming a different amount of resources we have. And specifically, we're looking at direct labor. So for example, job 45 had $6,400 in direct labor cost, which is only $560 for job 47. So it would be really unfair for us to apply out the same amount of overhead to each one of those jobs, right? They're not consuming the same amount of our resources that we have. So our overhead, 65% of direct labor cost. So we take our direct labor cost and multiply it by 65% for each one of our jobs. And we're going to total them out to get what our ending balance is for each one of those jobs. Those are our little mini job order cost sheets. So they give us some information about where our jobs kind of stand at the end of the period. So at the end of the period, jobs 44, 45, and 47 were all completed. Only job 45 was sold. So jobs 44, 45, and 47 were completed. So jobs 44, 45, and 47 were completed. But they told us that only job 45 was sold. So now that we have that information, when we go to answer what our ending balances are for work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold, it's going to make things a little bit easier for us. So work in process, well, job 44, 45, and 47 were all completed, meaning they're no longer in process. That means the only thing that we still have in process at the end of this month is job 46. So our work in process account, the inventory account for work in process on our balance sheet would just include the $3,285 for work in process. Finished goods is also an asset account, and it represents jobs that we've completed but have not sold. So we've completed job 44 and we completed job 47, but we haven't sold either one of those jobs yet. So our finished goods inventory on our balance sheet would be for that $13,524. And cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold represents any job that I've completed and sold to the customer. How much did it cost me to complete that job? The only job I sold was job 45. So we're at $24,120 for our cost of our goods sold.